Question 1. Topic: defamation. Public versus private figures' actual malice standard. During a comprehensive review of a process that needs improvement, a well-known journalist publishes an investigative article about a billionaire entrepreneur, accusing them of fraud and unethical business practices. The entrepreneur sues for defamation, alleging that the statements are false and have damaged their reputation. Which of the following is the most apt standard the court will apply to determine liability? A. The journalist will be liable if the entrepreneur proves the statements were false, regardless of intent. B. The entrepreneur must prove that the journalist acted with actual malice, meaning they either knew the statements were false or recklessly disregarded the truth. C. The journalist is automatically immune from liability under the First Amendment because the article concerns public figure. D. The entrepreneur must only prove negligence, showing reasonable journalist would have verified the information more thoroughly before publishing. Answer B. The entrepreneur must prove that the journalist acted with actual malice, meaning they either knew the statements were false or recklessly disregarded the truth. Explanation. Under New York Times Company v. Sullivan, 1964, public figures such as billionaire entrepreneurs must prove actual malice in defamation cases. This means that they must show the journalist either knew the statements were false or acted with reckless disregard for the truth. This high burden of proof is designed to protect freedom of the press and robust public debate. Is incorrect because strict liability does not apply to defamation. Mere falsity is insufficient to establish liability for public figure. C is incorrect because the First Amendment does not grant automatic immunity for defamatory statements, even about public figures. D is incorrect because negligence is the standard for private individuals. Public figures must meet the higher actual malice standard. Question 2. Topic: negligence. Duty of care and special duties of professionals. In a high-stakes environment where multiple challenges arise, a patient undergoes surgery performed by a leading surgeon in the field. Despite following general medical practices, the surgeon deviates from a newly established protocol that has been widely accepted in the profession. The patient suffers complications and files a medical malpractice lawsuit claiming negligence. Which of the following best describes how the court will analyze the surgeon's duty of care? A. The surgeon is automatically liable because any deviation from standard protocol constitutes negligence. B. The court will assess whether the surgeon's actions met the standard of care expected of reasonable professional in the same specialty. C. The surgeon is not liable because they followed general medical practices, even if new protocol was widely accepted. D. The patient must prove that the surgeon intended to cause harm in order to establish. Answer B. The court will assess whether the surgeon's actions met the standard of care expected of reasonable professional in the same specialty. Explanation. Medical malpractice cases apply the standard of care expected of reasonable professional in the same field. Courts consider whether the physician adhered to practices that similarly situated competent specialist would follow. In Hall v. Ilbun, 1985, courts ruled that medical negligence depends on expert testimony establishing the expected level of care. Is incorrect because deviation from protocol does not automatically result in negligence. The courts analyzed the reasonableness of the decision under the circumstances. C is incorrect because while general medical practice is irrelevant, widely accepted new protocol may redefine the applicable standard of care. D is incorrect because negligence does not require intent to harm, only failure to meet the appropriate standard of care. Question 3. Topic: strict liability. Product liability and design defects. When scaling up operations that experience significant consumer demand, a car manufacturer releases a new model with an innovative fuel system. After several reports of cars catching fire due to overheating, a consumer sues the manufacturer under strict product liability for a design defect. What must the plaintiff prove to succeed? A. That the manufacturer was negligent in designing the product. B. That the fuel system was unreasonably dangerous due to its design, even if the manufacturer exercised all possible care. C. That the manufacturer had actual knowledge of the defect and failed to issue a recall. D. That the consumer misused the vehicle in a foreseeable manner. Answer B. That the fuel system was unreasonably dangerous due to its design, even if the manufacturer exercised all possible care. Explanation. Strict liability applies in product defect cases, meaning the plaintiff does not need to prove negligence, only that the product was unreasonably dangerous due to design defect. Courts typically use tests such as consumer expectation test, restatement, 2nd of Torts SSA, If product is more dangerous than an ordinary consumer would expect, it is defective. Risk utility test. Restatement. Third of torts. Product's liability. If the risks of design outweigh its benefits, it is defective, is incorrect because strict liability does not. Proving negligence. C is incorrect because manufacturer's knowledge is not necessary for strict liability, though it may be relevant for punitive damages. D is incorrect because consumer misuse may be defense, but the core issue is whether the design itself was inherently dangerous. Question 4. Negligence. Proximate cause and foreseeability. During an emergency response where multiple areas are impacted, fire breaks out in commercial warehouse due to an electrical short circuit. The fire rapidly spreads to neighboring chemical plant, causing an explosion. The explosion releases toxic fumes, which travel downwind and affect residential community, leading to severe respiratory illnesses among the residents. One of the affected individuals, Mr. Smith, files lawsuit against the owner of the commercial warehouse alleging negligence. The defendant argues that while the fire may have been foreseeable, the explosion and subsequent toxic fume exposure were too remote to hold them liable. Which of the following legal principles is most relevant in determining the defendant's liability? A. The Buffer test. Liability is established if the harm would not have occurred but for the defendant's conduct. B. Intervening and superseding cause. Defendant is not liable if an independent, unforeseeable event breaks the causal chain. C. The direct consequences rule. Liability extends to all direct consequences of negligent act, regardless of foreseeability. D. Foreseeability and proximate cause. Liability depends on what harm was foreseeable consequence of the initial negligent act. Answer D. Foreseeability and proximate cause. Liability depends on whether the harm was foreseeable consequence of the initial negligent act. Explanation. In tort law, proximate cause is a critical factor in determining negligence liability. The key question is whether the injury was foreseeable result of the defendant's negligence. The Buffer test, option A, establishes factual causation, but it does not limit liability based on foreseeability. Intervening and superseding causes, option B, can relieve defendant of liability, but in this case, an explosion at neighboring facility due to fire may be foreseeable rather than an unforeseeable superseding cause. The direct consequences rule, option C, is rarely applied in modern tort law because it does not consider foreseeability. Courts typically use the foreseeability test, option D, which holds that if the type of harm suffered, toxic inhalation, was foreseeable given the risk created by the defendant's negligence, fire in commercial warehouse, then liability is appropriate. Question 5. Defamation. Public versus private figures. In case where multiple parties have different objectives, famous journalist publishes an article in national newspaper accusing prominent business executive of fraudulent practices. The executive denies the allegations and sues the journalist for defamation, claiming that the article was based on false information. The journalist argues that the executive is a public figure and therefore proof. Actual malice to succeed in the defamation claim. Which of the following legal standards applies in this case? A negligence standard. The plaintiff only needs to prove that the journalist failed to exercise reasonable care in verifying the truth of the statements. B. Actual malice standard. The plaintiff must prove that the journalist published the false statement with knowledge of its falsity or reckless disregard for the truth. C. Strict liability standard. The journalist is automatically liable for defamation if the statement was false, regardless of intent. Negligence. D. Preponderance of the evidence standard. The plaintiff must show by preponderance of the evidence that the statements were false and damaging. Answer. B. Actual malice standard. The plaintiff must prove that the journalist published the false statement with knowledge of its falsity or reckless disregard for the truth. Explanation. Under New York Times Company v. Sullivan, 1964, public figures must prove actual malice to succeed in defamation case. This means they must show that the defendant either knowingly published falsehood or acted with reckless disregard for the truth. The negligence standard, option A, applies only to private individuals, as established in Gertz v. Robert Welch, Inc., 1974. Strict liability, option C, is not recognized standard in defamation law, as intent and fault play a crucial role. The preponderance evidence standard, option D, applies to the burden of proof in civil cases but does not determine the legal standard for defamation claims. Question 6. Product liability. Failure to warn. During the introduction of new methods where coordination is essential, pharmaceutical company releases new prescription drug to treat chronic pain. The drug undergoes clinical testing, but rare and severe side effect. Liver failure is not prominently disclosed in the warnings. After several patients develop liver failure, class action lawsuit is filed against the company for failure to warn. The company argues that the side effect was rare and that physicians should have exercised professional judgment in prescribing the medication. Which legal principle is most relevant in determining the company's liability? A learned intermediary doctrine. Manufacturer satisfies its duty to warn by informing physicians, who then advise patients. B. Strict liability for design defects. The company is liable if safer alternative design was feasible. C. Res ipsa loquitur. The harm is so unusual that negligence is presumed. D. Negligence per se. The company is automatically liable for violating regulatory requirement. Answer. A learned intermediary doctrine. Manufacturer satisfies its duty to warn by informing physicians, who then advise patients. Explanation. In pharmaceutical product liability, the learned intermediary doctrine, option A, holds that drug manufacturer fulfills its duty to warn by adequately informing healthcare providers, who then communicate risks to patients. However, if the manufacturer fails to properly disclose risks, it will still be held liable. Strict liability for design defects, option B, applies to cases involving defective product designs, not failures to warn. Res ipsa loquitur, option C, is inapplicable because liver failure is not an event that inherently implies negligence. Negligence per se, option D, applies when company violates specific law or regulation, which is not necessarily the case here. Question 7. Vicarious liability, employer responsibility. In an environment where different components must interact efficiently, hospital employs surgeon who negligently operates on patient, causing serious harm. The patient sues the hospital, claiming that it is liable for the surgeon's actions. The hospital argues that the surgeon is an independent contractor and that it should not be held responsible. Which legal doctrine is most relevant? Determining the hospital's liability. A. Respondit superior. An employer is liable for the torts of employees acting within the scope of employment. B. Borrowed servant doctrine. Liability depends on which entity controlled the worker at the time of the negligent act. C. Joint and several liability. Multiple defendants are collectively responsible for damages. D. Assumption of risk. The patient only accepted the risks of surgery. Answer. A. Respondit superior. An employer is liable for the tort of employees acting within the scope of employment. Explanation. Under the doctrine of respondit superior, employers are liable for the wrongful acts of their employees if performed within the scope of employment. If the surgeon is deemed an employee, the hospital will be vicariously liable. However, if the surgeon is an independent contractor, liability depends on factors such as control at work. The borrowed servant doctrine, option B, applies when an employee is temporarily under the control of another employer, which is not the issue here. Joint and several liability, option C, determines how damages are shared but does not establish liability. Assumption of risk, option D, is defense that applies in limited circumstances, such as informed consent, but does not absolve hospital of vicarious liability. Question 8. Premises liability. Duty owed to trespassers. During the expansion of property where legal boundaries are contested, homeowner has large backyard with an unfenced swimming pool. Several children from the neighborhood frequently trespass onto the property to swim in the pool. One day, a 6-year-old child drowns in the pool while the homeowner is away. The child's parents sue the homeowner for negligence, arguing that the pool was an attractive nuisance. Which legal principle will most likely determine the homeowner's liability? A. General duty of care. Property owner owes duty of reasonable care to all individuals on their land, including trespassers. B. Attractive nuisance doctrine. Landowner may be liable for injuries to children caused by hazardous conditions that are likely to attract them. C. Comparative negligence. The child's actions reduce the homeowner's liability if the child was partially responsible for trespassing. D. Assumption of risk. The child assumed the risk of drowning by choosing to swim in the pool. Answer. B. Attractive nuisance doctrine. Landowner may be liable for injuries to children caused by hazardous conditions that are likely to attract them. Explanation. Under the attractive nuisance doctrine, landowners may be liable for injuries to children trespassers if the condition is likely to attract children, the risk of harm is not understood by children, the burden of making the area safe is low compared to the danger. Swimming pool is classic an attractive nuisance, and the homeowner may be held liable for failing to secure it. General duty of care, option A, applies to invitees and licensees, but is limited for trespassers. Comparative negligence, option C, typically applies to adults but does not negate child's inability to recognize danger. Assumption of risk, option D, does not apply because children cannot legally assume risk in the same way adults can. Question 9. Defenses to negligence. Last, clear chance doctrine. In situation where both parties contribute to the danger, pedestrian is jaywalking across busy street at night while distracted by their phone. Driver, who is slightly exceeding the speed limit, notices the pedestrian but fails to stop in time, causing an injury. The pedestrian sues the driver for negligence, but the driver argues that the pedestrian was also negligent. This follows contributory negligence rule but allows for last clear chance exception. Which legal doctrine will most likely determine whether the pedestrian can recover damages? A. Contributory negligence. If the plaintiff was even slightly negligent, they cannot recover damages. B. Last clear chance doctrine. If the defendant had the final opportunity to avoid harm, they may still be liable. C. Comparative negligence. The plaintiff's negligence reduces but does not eliminate their ability to recover damages. D. Sudden emergency doctrine. The defendant is not liable if they acted reasonably in an emergency. Answer B. Last clear chance doctrine. If the defendant had the final opportunity to avoid harm, they may still be liable. Explanation. In states that follow contributory negligence, plaintiff is barred from recovery if they were even slightly at fault. However, the last clear chance doctrine allows an otherwise negligent plaintiff to recover if the defendant had the final opportunity to prevent the harm but failed to do so. Comparative negligence, C, would apply in different jurisdiction where fault is apportioned, and sudden emergency doctrine, option D, applies when an emergency arises suddenly rather than when driver already has time to react. Question 10. Medical malpractice. Standard of care in high-pressure scenario where immediate action is required. Patient experiencing chest pain visits the emergency room. The attending physician, believing the symptoms are indigestion, does not order further tests. The patient later suffers fatal heart attack. The patient's family sues the hospital for medical malpractice. The hospital argues that the physician acted within the reasonable judgment of professionals. Which of the following is most relevant in determining whether malpractice occurred? A. Strict liability standard. The physician is automatically liable for any misdiagnosis. B. Reasonable physician standard. The physician's actions are compared to what a similarly trained doctor would have done under similar circumstances. C. Res ipsa loquitur. The outcome, death, speaks for itself and proves negligence. D. Statute of limitations. The family must file the lawsuit within specific time frame. Answer B. Reasonable physician standard. The physician's actions are compared to what similarly trained doctor would have done under similar circumstances. Explanation. Medical malpractice is evaluated using the reasonable physician standard, meaning the physician's actions are judged based on what competent doctor with similar training would have done in the same situation. Strict liability standard, option A, does not apply to medical malpractice as doctors are automatically liable for adverse outcomes. Res ipsa loquitur, option C, applies only when negligence is obvious, e.g., surgical tool left inside patient. Statute of limitations, option D, is procedural issue but does not determine whether malpractice occurred. Question 11. Defamation. Public figures versus private individuals. In high-stakes environment where multiple challenges are presented, prominent actor sues popular social media influencer for publishing false statements regarding their involvement in controversial political event. The influencer claims they had no malicious intent, stating that their comments were based on public information they assumed was accurate. The actor argues that statements caused significant harm to their reputation. Which legal standard must the actor meet to succeed in defamation suit as public figure? A. Proof of actual malice, meaning the influencer acted with knowledge of falsity or reckless disregard for the truth. B. Proof of negligence, meaning the influencer failed to verify the information. C. Proof of defamation per se, meaning the statement was inherently harmful. D. Proof that the influencer acted with ill will or hatred toward the actor. Answer A. Proof of actual malice, meaning the influencer acted with knowledge of falsity or reckless disregard for the truth. Explanation. Under U.S. defamation law, public figures must prove actual malice in defamation cases. This means the actor must show that the influencer made the false statements either knowing they were false or with reckless disregard for the truth. New York Times v. Sullivan. This higher standard protects freedom of speech while ensuring that public figures can seek redress for damaging lies. Question 12. Trespass to land and defense of property. While investigating a complicated issue between different property owners, a person enters another's land without permission to investigate a possible trespass that was affecting their property rights. The owner of the land confronts the person and forcibly removes them, claiming self-defense of their property. What legal standard will apply to the person's defense of trespass, and under what circumstances might landowner's actions be justified? A. The person has a right to enter the land if they believe there is a legitimate concern of harm to their property. B. The person can be removed without force, as trespassing is a criminal offense. C. The landowner's force may be justified if the person was threatening harm to the land. D. The landowner must call law enforcement instead of acting personally to remove the trespasser. Answer C. The landowner's force may be justified if the person was threatening harm to the land. Explanation. A landowner can use reasonable force to remove a trespasser, but only if the trespasser is not merely on the land, but is engaged in actions that threaten harm. Self-defense of property can be used, but the force must be proportional to the threat. G. Reasonable, non-lethal force. Use of excessive force can result in liability for battery. Question 13. Negligence. Duty of care for professionals. When implementing new protocols in shared environment, surgeon performs an operation in hospital failing to meet the standard of care for procedure. The patient suffers significant complications due to the surgeon's oversight in following the standard protocol. The surgeon claims that they were under time pressure which caused them to make mistake. Which legal theory would apply to the surgeon's act? In medical malpractice case, A. Negligence per se, because the surgeon violated statutory duty. B. Res ipsa loquitur, meaning the act of negligence is self-evident. C. The standard of care applies and the surgeon must demonstrate they met it under the circumstances. D. The surgeon is exempt from liability due to the Good Samaritan law. Answer C. The standard of care applies and the surgeon must demonstrate they met it under the circumstances. Explanation. In medical malpractice cases, the surgeon's actions will be judged based on the standard of care for the procedure performed. The standard of care is typically established by expert testimony and should reflect what other competent surgeons would have done under similar circumstances. The time pressure may be considered but does not excuse failing to meet required care level. Question 14. Product liability. Defect in design. During comprehensive review of process that needs improvement, consumer purchases blender that later malfunctions, causing an injury. The malfunction is due to design defect that causes the blades to become dislodged during regular use even though no manufacturing defect was involved. The manufacturer argues that the design was the best available at the time. Which legal doctrine applies? The product liability claim based on the design defect. A. The consumer expectation test, which asks whether the product performed as an ordinary consumer would expect. B. The risk utility test, which evaluates whether the design's benefits outweigh its risks. C. Strict liability, since the product caused harm regardless of the manufacturer's intent. D. Warranty of merchantability, meaning the product failed to meet general expectations of quality. Answer B. The risk utility test, which evaluates whether the design's benefits outweigh its risks. Explanation. In design defect cases, courts typically apply the risk utility test, which weighs the product's benefits against its risks. If the risk of harm posed by the design is greater than the benefits of the design, the manufacturer may be found liable. The consumer expectation test is more commonly used for evaluating manufacturing not design defects. Question 15. Intentional infliction of emotional distress. In a situation where formal requirements conflict with personal interactions, a person overhears their colleague making a series of cruel and demeaning comments about their work performance. The person does not confront the colleague immediately, but later develops emotional distress, including anxiety and depression, as a result of the comments. They decide to file a claim for aid. What must the person prove to succeed in an aid claim? A. The comments were extreme and outrageous, and the distress caused was severe. B. The person was unable take legal action immediately due to emotional instability. C. The colleague knew the person would react negatively to the comments. D. The comments were a public matter that affected the person's professional reputation. Correct answer: A. The comments were extreme and outrageous, and the distress caused was severe. Explanation: to succeed in an EAT claim, the person must prove that the defendant's conduct was extreme and outrageous and that it caused severe emotional distress. Mere insults or harsh comments are typically insufficient, and the distress must be more than transient or minor. Restatement. Second of Torts SS 46. Question 16. Vicarious liability. Employer-employee relationship in an environment where different components must interact seamlessly. Delivery driver employed by shipping company negligently causes an accident while driving to make personal stop. The victim sues both the driver and the employer, arguing that the employer should be held liable for the driver's actions. What legal doctrine governs whether the employer is vicariously liable for the driver's actions? A. The independent contractor defense, which holds the employer not liable for actions taken by the driver. B. Respondit superior, which holds employers liable for the actions of employees acting within the scope of employment. C. Comparative negligence, which reduces the employer's liability based on the employee's degree of fault. D. The master-servant rule, which holds employers liable for any actions their servants take. Answer: B. Respondit superior, which holds employers liable for the actions of employees acting within the scope of employment. Explanation: under the doctrine of respondit superior, employers can be held vicariously liable for the negligent acts of employees if those acts occur within the scope of employment. The driver's actions were likely not within the scope if they were unrelated to work duties, e.g., making personal stop, and the employer may be liable unless the driver was engaged in work-related tasks at the time of the accident. Question 17. Nuisance. Private versus public nuisance. During seamless transition where continuity must be maintained across jurisdictions, company dumps hazardous chemicals into nearby river. While this affects the local community, the company claims that the dumping is legally permitted under state regulations. Local residents sue for nuisance, arguing that their enjoyment of the river is impacted by the contamination. Which type of claim is most appropriate for the resident to pursue? A. Public nuisance, as it involves the health and safety of the community at large. B. Private nuisance, as it involves specific harm to the resident's property. C. Strict liability, because the company violated environmental laws. D. Negligence, because the company failed to properly dispose of the chemicals. Answer: B. Private nuisance, as it involves a specific harm to the resident's property. Explanation: in this case, the resident would most likely bring claim for private nuisance because they are suffering specific harm due to the chemical dumping that interferes with their use of the river. Public nuisance would apply if the entire community were affected, but this case focuses on the resident's private enjoyment of their property. Question 18. Medical malpractice. Informed consent. While managing hybrid approach where timing issues must be considered, doctor performs surgery on patient without fully disclosing the risks involved in the procedure. The patient later suffers complications and claims that they would not have consented to the surgery if they had known the full extent of the potential risks. Which legal claim is the patient most likely to pursue? A. Battery, because the doctor performed an unauthorized procedure. B. Informed consent, because the patient was not given full disclosure of the risks. C. Res ipsa loquitur, because the outcome of the surgery was unusual and unexpected. D. Negligence, because the doctor failed to meet the appropriate standard of care during the surgery. Answer: B. Informed consent, because the patient was not given full disclosure of the risks. Explanation: informed consent claims are based on the failure of medical professionals to adequately inform patients about the risks of a procedure. If a doctor fails to disclose material risks and the patient suffers harm as a result, the patient may bring a claim for medical malpractice based on lack of informed consent. Question 19. Strict liability. Dangerous animals. When developing solution that must address opposing needs in community. Homeowner keeps large dog that has history of aggression towards strangers. One day the dog bites delivery person who was lawfully on the homeowner's property. The homeowner argues that they did not know the dog would bite the delivery person. Which legal doctrine will most likely hold the homeowner strictly liable for the person's injury? A. Negligence per se, as the homeowner failed to comply with local animal control laws. B. Vicarious liability, as the homeowner is responsible for the actions of the dog. C. Strict liability, as the dog is considered dangerous animal. D. Respondit superior, as the homeowner is liable for the dog's actions during business hours. Answer: C. Strict liability, as the dog is considered a dangerous animal. Explanation: strict liability applies to injuries caused by dangerous animals, regardless of whether the owner knew the animal was likely to cause harm. In this case, the dog's history of aggression towards strangers would likely classify it as dangerous animal under strict liability standards. Restatement 2nd of Torts SS 509. Question 20. During a critical transition period where existing processes must be replaced with more efficient alternatives, a company is moving from manual data entry to an automated system. However, employees are resistant to change due to fear of job loss and unfamiliarity with the new system. What is the best approach to ensure a smooth transition? A. Immediately enforce the new system and terminate employees who refuse to comply. B. Provide comprehensive training, highlight benefits, and implement the change gradually. C. Keep both systems running indefinitely to allow employees to choose their preferred method. D. Delay the transition until all employees are comfortable with automation. Answer: B. Provide comprehensive training, highlight benefits, and implement the change gradually. Bulb explanation: employees often resist change due to uncertainty. Providing proper training, demonstrating the benefits of automation, and allowing phased transition help employees adapt while maintaining productivity. Question 21. In a high-stakes environment where multiple challenges arise simultaneously, a hospital is facing a shortage of critical medical supplies, increased patient admissions, and understaffing. What is the best immediate course of action? A. Increase supply orders without assessing demand. B. Prioritize critical cases and implement resource allocation strategies. C. Hire additional staff without evaluating long-term needs. D. Reduce patient admissions to control resource usage. Answer: B. Prioritize critical cases and implement resource allocation strategies. Bulb explanation: in high-stakes environments, prioritizing resources based on urgency and need ensures effective crisis management. Long-term solutions, such as hiring and supply chain adjustments, should follow structured assessment. Question 22. When dealing with a complex system that shows occasional failures, a financial institution notices inconsistencies in its fraud detection algorithm, leading to both false positives and undetected fraud. What is the best approach to improve the system's accuracy? A. Disable the algorithm and rely solely on manual fraud detection. B. Implement machine learning enhancements while continuously monitoring outcomes. C. Reduce sensitivity to avoid false positives, even if some fraud goes undetected. D. Increase sensitivity, even if it results in many false positives. Answer: B. Implement machine learning enhancements while continuously monitoring outcomes. Bulb explanation: machine learning can refine fraud detection over time by adapting to new patterns. Continuous monitoring ensures that adjustments maintain balance between catching fraud and minimizing false positives. Question 23. While investigating a complicated issue between different departments, a manufacturing firm identifies that inconsistent quality control standards are causing defects in final products. How should the company resolve this? A. Hold each department accountable for its own quality without centralized oversight. B. Develop a standardized quality control framework and provide cross-department training. C. Reduce quality control requirements to speed up production. D. Assign blame to the department with the highest defect rate and impose penalties. Answer: B. Develop a standardized quality control framework and provide cross-department training. Bulb explanation: standardizing quality control ensures consistency across all departments. Training further helps employees understand and apply these standards effectively. Question 24. During a seamless transition where continuity must be maintained, a company is replacing outdated infrastructure with modern cloud-based solutions. What is the best approach to prevent disruptions? A. Switch everything to the new system at once. B. Run the old and new systems in parallel while gradually migrating data. C. Delay the transition indefinitely to avoid risks. D. Ignore concerns from employees and push forward with immediate changes. Answer: B. Run the old and new systems in parallel while gradually migrating data. Bulb explanation: parallel migration minimizes risks by ensuring continuity, allowing for troubleshooting before fully retiring the old system. Question 25. In a situation where resource allocation becomes A major challenge a global company is struggling to distribute budget and personnel across various regions with differing operational needs. What is the most effective strategy? A. Allocate resources equally across all regions. B. Assess each region's unique needs and allocate resources accordingly. C. Focus all resources on the highest performing region. D. Reduce resource distribution to control costs regardless of needs. Answer: B. Assess each region's unique needs and allocate resources accordingly. Bulb explanation: different regions have different demands. Tailored resource allocation strategy ensures efficiency and business growth. Question 26. When implementing new protocols in a shared environment, a corporate office is introducing stricter cybersecurity measures, but employees find the added security steps inconvenient. How should the company address this issue? A. Remove the additional security steps to improve convenience. B. Educate employees on the importance of security and streamline procedures where possible. C. Allow employees to bypass security if it slows down work. D. Enforce security measures without providing explanations. Answer: B. Educate employees on the importance of security and streamline procedures where possible. Bulb explanation: cybersecurity is essential, but user compliance increases when employees understand its importance. Simplifying security steps where feasible also helps maintain productivity. Question 27. While analyzing the root causes of sequential problems in a supply chain, a retail company finds that delayed shipments, poor inventory tracking, and inaccurate demand forecasting are interrelated. What should the company do first? A. Focus solely on fixing inventory tracking. B. Identify and address the underlying cause affecting all three issues. C. Increase stock levels to compensate for delays. D. Blame suppliers for shipment delays. Answer: B. Identify and address the underlying cause affecting all three issues. Bulb explanation: root cause analysis ensures that systemic problems are resolved rather than treating symptoms separately. Question 28. When developing a solution that must address opposing needs, a company must balance cost reduction with maintaining high product quality. What is the best approach? A. Cut costs aggressively, even if quality suffers. B. Invest in efficiency improvements to reduce costs while maintaining quality. C. Ignore cost concerns and focus only on quality. D. Use lower quality materials to reduce production expenses. Answer: B. Invest in efficiency improvements to reduce costs while maintaining quality. Bulb explanation: process optimization and technology investments help achieve cost reduction without sacrificing product quality. Question 29. During an emergency response where multiple areas are impacted, a city faces simultaneous power outages, road blockages, and medical emergencies due to a severe storm. What is the best response strategy? A. Prioritize restoring power while delaying medical response. B. Coordinate efforts by addressing the most life-threatening situations first. C. Focus only on clearing roads to improve long-term mobility. D. Wait for the storm to pass before taking action. Answer: B. Coordinate efforts by addressing the most life-threatening situations first. Bulb explanation: emergency response should prioritize life-saving actions while maintaining coordinated efforts to restore essential services. Question 30. In an environment where different components must interact seamlessly, a technology firm is integrating multiple software platforms into a unified system. However, compatibility issues are causing delays. What is the best approach to resolve this? A. Force all departments to use a single software, even if it doesn't meet all needs. B. Develop middleware solutions to ensure smooth communication between systems. C. Scrap the project and revert to the previous systems. D. Allow each department to use its own software without integration. Answer: B. Develop middleware solutions to ensure smooth communication between systems. Bulb explanation: middleware acts as bridge between different systems, allowing them to communicate effectively without requiring complete overhaul. This solution ensures integration while maintaining functionality.